Yo, what's up guys? Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I recently used to climb back into the top 15 with on the arena ladder. As you can see from the screenshot here, I'm currently 28-5 with this list, and a lot of those losses were really close as well, so decks felt great to me so far, and as usual, I'll have the untapped link down in the description if you want to check out the matchup spreads and stuff like that. I'm also in the middle of writing a full in-depth deck guide article for this deck over on MTGAzone Premium that will probably be out in the next couple of days or so, which will have a bunch more details, a full sideboard guide, how I change the deck for best of one, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So if you're a premium member, keep your eyes open for that over the next few days, and I'll have a link to it down in the description once it goes live as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Boros Auras deck in Historic. Now, obviously Auras as an archetype has been around in Historic for a really long time now, but it hasn't really been top tier for a while. However, we got in Duskmourn both Shard Mage's Rescue and Sheltered by Ghosts, which are huge additions to the archetype, and then also fairly recently we got Demonic Ruckus from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So I think these three cards are really big buffs to this archetype that could potentially push it towards being a top tier deck again. So if you're not familiar with this archetype, it's basically built around getting one or two creatures into play and then just loading them up with a bunch of auras to make a huge creature that can either race against the slower decks or make it really difficult for the smaller decks to attack past. So the two main creatures in the deck, the two most powerful cards are Core Spirit Dancer and Light Pause. So Spirit Dancer basically turns all of your auras into card advantage, whilst also growing very quickly once you load it up with a bunch of auras. So it grows very quickly and ensures that you don't run out of gas as well. And then Light Pause, very similar thing, but is probably even more powerful because rather than putting those auras into your hand where you have to invest mana to put them into play, Light Pause puts additional auras directly onto it, and it can also tutor auras as well, which means that, you know, if you're in a situation where you need removal, you can tutor up Sheltered by Ghost. If you need flying, you can tutor up Griffspoon. So this card is probably the most powerful turn 2 play that we can have, and can oftentimes just win on turn 3 if it survives, until your next turn, which is pretty big. Then in terms of the other creatures, we've also got Esper Sentinel and Giver of Runes, which is really important to have something to do on turn 1. Esper Sentinel in particular is very nice because it punishes the opponent's removal, right? Your biggest weakness as a deck that is trying to put a bunch of auras on creatures is spot removal on the creature that you're trying to suit up. So Esper Sentinel punishing the opponent's early removal is good because then it turns those auras into card neutral if the opponent does kill the creature in response. And it's also just another creature that is decent to put auras on as well. Now obviously, unlike Core Spirit Dancer and Light Pause, it doesn't generate card advantage when you put auras on top of it, but it does grow its power, which means that you often draw cards when the opponent tries to cast non-creature spells, because once you get a few auras on this and it goes up to like a 4 or 5 power creature, it's basically impossible for the opponent to pay the tax on this as well. So Sentinel is really nice as a turn 1 play that kind of protects your turn 2 creatures, but is also just a decent creature to suit up itself. And then we've also got Giver of Runes here, which is much better at actually protecting your creatures, right? Giver of Runes on turn 1 into Spirit Dancer or Light Pause on turn 2 is a really solid line, because even if the opponent has removal, they oftentimes have to point it on the Giver of Runes because you can protect your Spirit Dancer or Light Pause, and this is just the best in slot of what doing this. You know, we've seen in the past cards like Selfless Savior, which is one shot and doesn't work against exile removal, and Skrelv, which is much worse in general, because this also, the other bonus of giving protection is that it also can be used offensively, particularly against decks like Mono Green Devotion. You can oftentimes just give your creature protection from green because all of their creatures are green unless they've tutored Haywire Might, and then just allow you to attack in for lethal. So Giver of Runes is really good both defensively and offensively as well. However, it is worth noting that if you give your creature protection from white or red, it will make all of the auras fall off, which does come up because a lot of decks are running Fragment Reality right now. So say you have a Spirit Dancer with like 3 or 4 white auras on, and the opponent uses a Fragment Reality or a Prismatic Ending on the Spirit Dancer. If you give them protection from white, all of the white auras will fall off, and same thing with protection from red as well, which is a downside, but oftentimes keeping your Spirit Dancer or Light Pause alive is worth it. And we do have a lot of white auras that can be played from the graveyard, like Sentinel's Eyes and Griffspoon as well, so not too much of an issue, but it's something that's worth bearing in mind. And then one other nice addition that we get from running red is Amped Raptor here, which is what I'm running as the additional 2-drop creature. Now obviously SRAM is a card that's seen a decent amount of play in auras in the past, but I just think that card is way too slow right now. It's just a strictly worse Core Spirit Dancer that is legendary, so it's really bad to draw in multiples, and is just so slow. I think Spirit Dancer, you know, is definitely slower than Light Pause, and SRAM not getting the additional +2/+2 is just, it just felt way too slow to me. Whereas Amped Raptor, obviously it doesn't produce card advantage for every aura you play, but at worst you cast Amped Raptor on turn 2 and hit another aura, which just puts the aura on it straight away. It can also be used to find your creatures, so increases your chances of finding your powerful Core Spirit Dancer or Light Pause. Once you have one of these in play, if you play the Amped Raptor and you hit an aura, then it triggers you both your Core Spirit Dancer and your Light Pause as well. And then like I said, worst case scenario is you play the Amped Raptor and then hit another aura, which can just go directly on it as well. So Raptor has felt really good as just an additional creature that can find your kind of game-winning threats and can also just put auras on itself. It already has First Strike as well, which is a really good keyword to have on a creature that you're trying to make big with a bunch of auras. So Amp Raptor has felt really good in this slot, and it's just felt so much faster than SRAM that just feels really slow in general to me right now. So I've been really happy with running Amp Raptor in this slot. And then obviously, since we're running a Lurrus deck, it's always guaranteed to hit here as well, which is pretty nice. Then in terms of the auras, the ones I want to talk about first are just the new ones, because these are so powerful. So Shard Mage's Rescue, first of all, is basically a protection spell on an aura, which is such a big upgrade for this deck in particular, because in the past, we've seen these sorts of decks run cards like Loran's Escape that we're running in the sideboard, and then, Karametra's Blessing and Slip Out the back, which are all really powerful effects to protect your creature. But the fact this does the same thing and is an aura is so big because it gets to trigger your creatures, which is not only great because it means if you do use it in response to an opponent's removal spell, you not only get to fizzle their removal spell, but you also get to draw a card off Spirit Dancer, you also get to trigger the Light Pause. But additionally, even if you're not using it to protect your creature, there will often be spots where you have a Spirit Dancer or Light Pause in play, and you just need another aura to keep the chain going, to keep drawing cards off Spirit Dancer, to put another tutored aura onto the Light Pause. And so the fact that we can just use this proactively as well just means that our hands where we do have it are so much better, right? If you had a situation where you have a Spirit Dancer or Light Pause in play, and you've got a land and a Loran's Escape, it being an instant means that you can't use it proactively to keep using Spirit Dancer and Light Pause. So the fact that this can be used defensively and still trigger, and offensively to keep the chain going, is such a big upgrade. And then Sheltered by Ghost, this card is absolutely absurd. I was pretty excited about this when I was going through the spoiler, and having played with it, this card just feels ridiculous to me. So it's a 2-mana aura, there's an Oblivion Ring, so it takes out creatures or, creature of any size or any permanent whatsoever. It can take out Goblin Bombardment, it can take out Planeswalkers like Karn or Kiora, and then it also gives the creature +1/+0, lifelink, and ward 2, which is just insane for 2 mana. And all of those things, obviously the removal spell for 2 mana, having a 2 mana Oblivion Ring is already way above rate. So even if that's all it did, it would be worth considering in this sort of deck. But the fact it gives the creature a buff to its power, lifelink, which is an incredibly valuable keyword in these sorts of decks, and ward 2, which is just great. Obviously with these sorts of decks you really want to be protecting your creatures, so getting this down on turn 2 or turn 3 if you play a Spirit Dancer or Light Pause on turn 2 is so strong. Like, this card just feels a crazy buff to the archetype to me. And then Demonic Ruckus I also want to talk about in conjunction with Sheltered by Ghost, because this is a card that I was very excited to try out in auras after Outlaws of Thunder Junction. I think without Shard Mage's Rescue and Sheltered by Ghost, this card alone isn't really good enough to make the archetype playable, but with these cards it works so well. So the really big thing that I like about Demonic Ruckus is it gives us another good thing to do on turn 1, right? If you don't have Sentinel Giver of Runes, you can just plot this on turn 1, and then when you cast your Spirit Dancer or Light Pause on turn 2, you can then immediately equip the Ruckus to it, which first of all, if the opponent doesn't have removal held up and they're playing red removal, like damage-based removal as their main source of interaction, this just makes it impossible to kill the creature, because core Spirit Dancer will immediately go up to 5 toughness. Same thing with Light Pause, which is really huge. So it gives the creature +1/+1 menace and trample, which is really key. I think trample is probably the more important of the two keywords there, because once you have a really big Spirit Dancer or Light Pause, the opponent can just chump block you if you don't have flying or trample as a way to force through damage. But menace is obviously a pretty big buff to forcing through damage as well. And then when it goes to the graveyard, you get to draw a card as well. So this is a really nice one to get down early, because if the opponent does use removal on your creature, then you still get some card advantage out of it as well. But the other really nice thing about this card is it opens up the line of going plot Demonic Ruckus on turn 1, then cast Light Pause on turn 2, put the aura on Light Pause, and then tutor up Sheltered by Ghosts to just remove whatever the opponent has. And this line is so strong. If the opponent doesn't have a removal spell to kill the Light Pause, then it gets lifelink on ward 2, which makes it really difficult to kill straight away, gives it a really big buff, takes the opponent's best thing out, gives it another +1/+0 off the Sheltered by Ghost. So this kind of synergy is so powerful. Being able to tutor up Sheltered by Ghosts has won me so many games off this as well. So Demonic Ruckus is just a nice upgrade to the archetype as well. Like I said, helps smooth your curve out because it gives you another thing to do on turn 1. But being able to tutor up Sheltered by Ghost off Light Pause is such a sick line as well. And then the other auras for Ethereal Armor is just the best 1-mana aura for sure. You always want this card because it provides such a big buff to your creatures. And with Light Pause, if you're not tutoring up Sheltered by Ghost, you oftentimes want to tutor up Ethereal Armor first, so then you can play Ethereal Armor afterwards. And then once you have 2 on your Light Pause, it suddenly becomes, close to a 20 power creature very quickly, which is obviously very powerful. And then the other auras we're basically running as one-ofs to be able to tutor off Light Pause, but are also just decent to draw on their own. Griffspoon giving flying is a really big deal. Being able to, especially if we don't have Trample off Demonic Ruckus, that's just a good way to force damage through if the opponent does have chump blockers in play. Sentinel's Eyes giving vigilance is very important against aggro decks, because it basically gives you a way to keep your creature back to block as well. And then you can also cast it from the graveyard, which is pretty nice, because if you are in situations where the opponent does kill your first creature, even if you're completely empty-handed, you can then, cast a follow-up Spirit Dancer or Light Pause, cast Sentinel's Eyes from the graveyard, and you only need to exile two other cards, so it's very easy to do, and then you can get the chain going again. And then Hammerhand is a very useful one to be able to tutor up as well, because not only can it give Light Pause haste, which is very important against decks like Control if they're tapped out after using a sweeper, but it can also make a creature not be able to block, which is very important if you already have a Light Pause with flying, for example. If you're against Mono Green Devotion and they have like a Cavalier of Thorns in play as their only reach blocker, you can just tutor up Hammerhands, make the Cavalier not be able to block, and then just force through lethal damage there as well. So those are the auras. I think, red giving you access to Demonic Ruckus for that Light Pause line, and is just one of the best 2-mana auras, is really big. It also gives you access to Amp Raptor, and then Hammerhand as well, is a really nice one to be able to tutor off Light Pause. Giving this haste is such a big deal. So even though there are other colours that you could consider, I think blue getting access to Spell Pierce from the sideboard is nice. Black, you could run Juggernaut Peddler over the Amped Raptor, and you can also run Kaya's Ghost Form. But I definitely think red is the best, and I'm not really sure there's much incentive to run, 3 or 4 colours like some lists have run in the past. I think red is very clean, and this has definitely felt like the best combination of auras to me, for sure. Then you also get to run Lurrus as your companion, which is obviously great in basically any deck, but it's particularly nice here because it gives you kind of, first of all, a mana sink if you do flood out. You're not likely to flood out with 21 lands, but that does happen in some games if you start drawing cards off Esper Sentinel, for example. But it just gives you kind of like an insurance policy if the opponent does remove your creatures, right? You are reliant on your Spirit Dancers and your Light Pause Living, so some games that won't happen, but you can always just put Lurrus into your hand, play it, rebuy the creature, and then forces the opponent to have 2 additional removal spells, one to take out the Lurrus and then to take out the Spirit Dancer or Light Pause that you replay. So having access to Lurrus here is really huge. Then in terms of the mana base, like I said, we've only got 21 lands, and I have been considering going up to 22. I think 21 has felt like a solid amount overall, but there have been some hands that I've had to mulligan where it's just a 1-lander, and if I don't draw the second land, the hand just kind of falls apart. So I have kind of considered going up to 22, but I'm not really sure what I would cut. I think all of the one-offs are pretty important. You could potentially cut Sentinel's Eyes for another Battlefield Forge or Plains if you did feel like 21 was a little too low, but it's felt decent to me. Obviously, even if you are running 22, you are sometimes going to have 1-landers, so for me, I think for consistency, 21 has felt a decent amount, but you could go up to 22, I wouldn't have fault you. In terms of the actual lands themselves, we've got basically all of the good red-white dual lands that enable you to have them all enter play untapped in the early game. And because of the line of Ruckus on 1 into Light Pause on turn 2, we really do want to ensure that we have red mana on turn 1, which is why I'm running a pretty painful mana base here of 4 Sacred Foundry, 4 Sunbaked Canyon, and 3 Battlefield Forge. But like I said, we really want a bunch of white mana. We really want red on turn 1 as well. So I think maxing out consistency of that is just the most important thing. Plus, we generally don't care too much about our life total because we tend to race against most decks, and obviously Sheltered by Ghost giving lifelink is a really good way to mitigate that as well. And the other really nice upside of being in red as well is we also get Sunbaked Canyon, which most other colours that are running white don't get access to, and this is really nice because it just gives you a way to dig towards more auras if you need them, or if you are empty-handed, you can just crack it to try and find another creature to keep going as well. So Sunbaked Canyon, even though it does deal you a decent amount of damage, being able to crack this has come up in so many games. And then outside of that, like I said, just all red-white dual lands to keep our mana consistent, and then a single Eye Ganjo is just more of a utility land as well. But yeah, main deck has felt super tight, and honestly, the addition of Shard Mage's Rescue, and particularly Sheltered by Ghost, has been such a big buff to this archetype. Auras has never felt stronger after the release of these cards. Anyway, moving on to the sideboard here, I want to start off by talking about Hushbringer, because this is one of the best sideboard cards in the format right now, and I think Boros Auras is one of the best decks at utilizing it as well. So obviously, there's a ton of sacrifice decks in the format right now, both the Mardu sacrifice deck and the 4-color Samwise deck that I covered in my last historic deck guide, and this card is just excellent against both of those decks. Not only does it shut off ETB effects from cards like Amped Raptor, Ajani, Guide of Souls, but it also shuts off all of their death triggers from Goblin Trapfinder, from Unlucky Witness. So this card is just a nightmare for those decks to deal with, especially against the 4-color Sam deck, because it shuts off Cauldron Familiar, it shuts off Samwise, it basically shuts off their whole ability to combo as well. So if the opponent can't kill this, and we are pretty good at protecting it with cards like Shard Mage's Rescue, and especially if they're reliant on Goblin Bombardment to kill this card, we can just buff its power with auras, which makes it really difficult for them to kill with Bombardment. And then obviously while it's in play, it denies them all their death triggers as well. So this card is just the best card in those matchups. And then additionally, it's also excellent against Mono Green Devotion, which is one of the other most commonly played decks in the format right now. Shuts off all their ETB cards from stuff like Cavalier of Thorns, Outcaster Trailblazer, the draw effect off Kiora, which is one of their main ways of having those crazy turns where they just, put a ton of cards into play. And then it also denies the death trigger of Cavalier of Thorns, which they're often forced to chump block with when we do have flying on our creatures as well. So Hushbringer is just the best card against the most commonly played decks in the format. Now obviously it doesn't work with Amped Raptor, so when we are boarding in Hushbringer, basically just a straight swap out, cut the 4 Amped Raptor, bring in the 4 Hushbringer. But yeah, this card is absolutely insane, and one of the main reasons why I've been able to do so well with this deck so far. Then outside of that, we got a couple copies of Tormod Crypt as Graveyard Hate, mainly for the Shifting Woodland deck, but obviously there will be a few more fringe graveyard decks floating around. Stuff like Kethis, stuff like Reanimator still pops up every now and then. Still see Phoenix occasionally. So yeah, Tormod Crypt mainly for the Shifting Woodland deck. And the reason I'm running this over stuff that costs more mana like Soul Guide Lantern or Unlicensed Hearse is you really don't want to interrupt your curve to get this in play, right? It's we have very important curves out of 1 into 2, whether that's Esper Sentinel into Core Spirit Dancer or Light Pause, or Giver into Spirit Dancer or Light Pause, or Ruckus into Light Pause, that we don't want to have to interrupt our curve to put the Graveyard Hate in play. And the reason why I'm running Tormod's Crypt over Surgical Extraction is just because you can replay it with Lurrus, which does come up in longer games. Plus, there are some decks that care about having a high density of cards in the graveyard, like Kethis or Underworld Breach as well. So I think it's pretty close. You could run Surgical here if you want, but I like running Tormod's Crypt just because it can be replayed with Lurrus in longer games. Then we got 3 Fragment Reality, which is our main interaction, against the mirror match. I have faced a couple of other people on Auras since the release of these, and then you've obviously got decks like, Is It Wizards, where you want to have a lot of interaction as well. The reason I've gone for Fragment Reality over Portable Hole is, first of all, specifically against Is It Wizards, Portable Hole is a lot more risky because of specifically Flame of Anor. But the other reason I really like Fragment Reality is because it can be used to take out bigger creatures against Devotion. Oftentimes they can get multiple creatures with Reach in play, like Polukranos plus Cavalier of Thorns. So being able to use this to just take out a Cavalier and then just attack through is very important. And honestly, we're not a deck that really cares about giving the opponent a smaller creature, so the downside of this is pretty negligible when you're playing a deck like Auras. So I definitely think the extra utility that you get off being able to take out bigger creatures is better than Portable Hole, in my opinion, so far. Then we've got 3 copies of Loran's Escape, which is very important against decks with a lot of interaction, which are typically your more tricky matchups. If you're up against a deck like, Rakdos with Sorin and Vein Ripper and a bunch of Fatal Pushes and Shavasides, this is very important there. And then also against Control, which is arguably your worst matchup against the top tier decks. I have managed to beat it a few times, but it's always felt a really close matchup. This gives you a way to play around destruction-based sweepers like Supreme Verdict and Wrath of the Skies, which is pretty nice. The one big weakness of this list, though, is against Blue, White, and Jeskai control decks running Divine Purge, because obviously running Red, White, you don't get access to cards like Spell Pierce, so you don't really have a good way to play around specifically Divine Purge, other than, just keeping some resources in your hands to be able to rebuild. And then obviously if the opponent doesn't have immediate pressure, you can start replaying your stuff from exile as well. So I have been able to beat Divine Purge, but we don't really have good counterplay to it. Even stuff like Temporary Lockdown we can take out with Fragment Reality. So yeah, that is one weak spot of the deck. We don't really have a good way around Divine Purge, but if the control player is choosing to run destruction-based sweepers like Wrath of the Skies, then Loran's Escape is very good there. And then finally, we've got a couple copies of Pithing Needle, which is important against a number of decks. So first of all, like I mentioned, Shifting Woodland is a deck that can potentially race you. So having both Pithing Needle and Tormod's Crypt as a way to shut that off is really nice, because you obviously just name Shifting Woodland with Needles shut off their key card. Also very nice against Goblin Bombardment, against all the sacrifice decks, and against Sorin if they're trying to cheat Satan Elender or Vein Ripper into play as well. So multiple uses there as well. So that's the deck overall. Like I said, the addition of Shard Mage's Rescue, and especially Sheltered by Ghost, is such a big buff to the archetype that I think your proactive game plan is now so much better across the board. And then being able to utilize 4 Hushbringer out the sideboard, which you can protect with both Shard Mage's Rescue and Giver of Runes, is so good against both the sacrifice Samwise decks and Mono Green Devotion, which accounts for a really big portion of the metagame. Now, I will say Control is your trickiest matchup. I still have a positive win rate against Control, but all of the matches have felt close. They've always felt really scrappy, and I could see it going either way, especially if the default Control deck starts running Divine Purge specifically, which we don't really have good counterplay for. You know, I have considered running stuff like Mana Tithe in the sideboard, but it's so narrow in what it does that I don't really think it's worth it. But having said that, I think the addition of stuff like Amped Raptor and just in general, the deck feels a lot more resilient to me. You know, I have faced Control and been Divine Purged 2 or 3 times and then still managed to recover and win the game, especially because you got stuff like Luris as well. So even though you do have a tricky matchup in Control, the deck has felt great. And then, like I said, you've got such a proactive game plan that more fringe decks you have a really solid matchup against as well, which is really sick. So next up, I've got some gameplay. I've just got 5 matches that I played with on the Arena Ladder. However, I've also got a ton of other matches recorded with this deck. So if you would like me to do a follow-up video that's just a bunch of extra gameplay, which I know people have been interested in the past, definitely let me know in the comments, and I can put out another video in a few days that's just a bunch of extra gameplay if you want to see this deck in more action. Either way, hope you enjoyed the deck guide, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Big up. So just like for the last qualifier video, what I'm going to be doing for the gameplay in this one is adding commentary after the fact rather than in the moment, just because I feel like it gives me a better opportunity to point out potential misplays, both playing and in sideboarding as well. So if you prefer this, definitely let me know in the comments. But also if you prefer me to do commentary while I'm playing, definitely let me know as well, and I'd be happy to go back to doing that. By the way, this hand looks really good to me, right? We've got Sentinel on 1, we got 2 Spirit Dancers and a 3rd land as well, so even if the opponent does go Fatal Push, pay the Sentinel tax, we can still just go follow up Core Spirit Dancer, put a Sentinel's Eyes on it immediately, which then puts it out of range of stuff like Goblin Bombardment, which is pretty nice. So putting these on Unlucky Witness into Amped Raptor here, so either on Mardu Sacrifice or potentially the 4-colour deck, and we just haven't seen the 4th colour yet, but pretty happy to see this start from the opponent. They don't really have too much pressure in play, they don't have a Bombardment in play either, so we don't have to worry about our creatures getting killed before they have an opportunity to grow. And then I like going for the 2nd Core Spirit Dancer here, just because I feel like you want to start turning your auras into double card advantage pretty early on. I can't remember if I attack or not here. I think I prefer not attacking, to be honest, because then we basically just give the opponent a free witness trigger. So that was a potential misplay, but I can see why I'd start getting in here just to start applying pressure. But yeah, looking back on it now, I think I prefer not attacking in that spot. But yeah, I definitely prefer playing the 2nd Spirit Dancer here, just because it's guaranteed to make the Amped Raptor better on following turns, right? The only other play you could really consider there was going Amped Raptor to see what you hit into a Sentinel's Eyes, and if I really needed to hit something like a Sheltered by Ghost, I could see going for that line instead. But now we've got 2 Spirit Dancers in play. Running out this Amped Raptor is really good, because if we hit another aura, we get to draw 2 and just keep the chain going, which is pretty sick. So opponent now has a Marionette Apprentice into play, which can deal, you know, a decent amount of damage to us as they start chump blocking with their creatures, but we hit Sheltered by Ghost off the Spirit Dancer, and now because we have both Spirit Dancers in play, we start drawing a bunch of cards as well, which is huge. And then I think I end up taking the Marionette Apprentice here, which I think I like. You could potentially make the argument for taking out one of the Trap Finder or Unlucky Witness, but you know, I think in this instance it's better to just, you know, prevent the damage. If they had only one Unlucky Witness or Trap Finder, then I definitely think I would be more inclined to take one of those instead, just to deny them the death trigger. But because they have 2 of them, I think it makes more sense to take out the Marionette Apprentice here. And now we've drawn Shard Mage's Rescue, which I think I like just holding on to here, right? I think the only way the opponent really gets back into this game is if they use Claim the Firstborn into a sack outlet on our big Core Spirit Dancer. So having a way to protect it here is really big, because that's going to be our route to victory. So the opponent does have a journey into Marionette Apprentice, so they do, you know, start going pretty wide here. And I think I like, you know, now they're tapped out, going for Shard Mage's Rescue during the end step, just to keep the cards flowing and make good use of our mana, because we would really like to find a way to, you know, prevent them from chump blocking here, whether that's a Demonic Ruckus, which we just hit off the top, or whether that would be like a Griff Spoon or something like that. Now we've got Demonic Ruckus, it's basically impossible for them to win here, right? So I'd like leading, well, I think I probably like leading on Demonic Ruckus here, because then we're guaranteed to have mana spare for future auras. So that's potentially another small misplay there, where looking back on it now, I think I would prefer to go for Demonic Ruckus here, just because, you know, there's a chance that Amped Raptor hits like another Giver of Runes, which would just kind of be a waste of mana here. But either way, we get Demonic Ruckus down. And if we can draw another untapped land, we can also use Shard Mage's Rescue at instant speed, which means that the opponent might not block. They might block to just stay alive, and then we can buff the Core Spirit Dancer again here. But I think we're basically guaranteed to win here. Yeah, opponent just scoops it up. So going into sideboarding, this is definitely a matchup where we want the 4 Hushbringers, so definitely going to swap out the 4 Amped Raptor for the Hushbringer here. One of the reasons why I wanted to add commentary after the fact is because it did take me a little while to figure out the sideboarding, and I think this is a matchup where I wasn't sideboarding correctly. Yeah, I just submit. So what I do now, after playing the matchup a few more times, is I also cut 2 copies of Esper Sentinel for 2 copies of Pithing Needle, specifically to name Goblin Bombardment, which isn't something I thought was that important. I thought having a Sentinel in the deck would be more important, but one of the ways they can beat you with fast starts, especially when you're going second, like we will be going into game 2 here, is if they get, creature into bombardment, they can then just start pinging down all of your creatures before you can get auras on them, which makes things very difficult. So not only does Pithing Needle shut that off and gives us another turn 1 play, which is pretty important, but it also makes it much more difficult for them to flip a Ajani when we don't have Hushbringer as well. So I don't think it ends up mattering in this match, but going forwards, if you are playing this matchup and you do pick up the deck yourself, I like boarding in 2 Pithing Needle over to Esper Sentinel, because Sentinel is good. They do have a number of non-creature spells, especially stuff like Village Rites, some of their more their slower cards, Sentinel's really good against. But if they do manage to get a bombardment down early, Sentinel is pretty bad. Or it's very easy for them to pick apart. And I feel like Pithing Needle on bombardment just fixes one of the potential avenues of attack the opponent has. So here, I think you just want to get Hushbringer down as early as possible in this matchup, just because if they don't have a removal spell for it immediately, it just shuts off so many of their proactive plays, whether that's a Ajani or sacrificing some of their cheaper creatures with death triggers. So the opponent has another Guide of Souls here, but Hushbringer just shuts that off. They have a Amped Raptor, but Hushbringer shuts that off as well. So, even without them having any sacrifice synergies, you can see how good this is against just their proactive ETBs, which is really nice. So here I like going for Light Pause and just passing back. I think in this spot, the only way the opponent is beating me here is by removing the Hushbringer. And so holding open Shard Mage's Rescue just seems so low opportunity cost here, right? We're not really at risk of just dying to these Amped Raptors attacking anytime soon. And if we do tap out here to plot a Demonic Ruckus or play a Griff Spoon, we just risk the opponent, using Claim the Firstborn or Fatal Push on Hushbringer, and then just potentially, giving themselves an out to just win the game. So here we definitely want to keep a mana spare going into the opponent's turn for Shard Mage's Rescue. So in order to make the best use of our mana, I think it makes sense to play the Demonic Ruckus here, and then we could go for Sheltered by Ghost, but honestly the opponent doesn't really have anything in play that we need to remove whilst we have this Hushbringer in play, and getting Ethereal Armor down basically stops the opponent from attacking with Amp Trapped, which is pretty nice as well. I prefer putting the Demonic Ruckus on the Hushbringer here as well, because it makes Goblin Bombardment a lot worse, right? If we have Hushbringer in play as a 1-2, they can play Bombardment, sacrifice a creature to ping the Hushbringer down, and then we're forced to use Shard Mage's Rescue on the second ping. If we make it a 2-3, then we can wait until the third ping, which makes them sacrifice another creature, which is a pretty big difference as well. Drawing another land here is pretty nice, because then it enables us to get Core Spirit Dancer down. So I think, again, we want to keep Shard Mage's Rescue available going into the opponent's turn, and then I think I like putting Griff Spoon on the Light Pause. Obviously, it doesn't get the same buff that the Core Spirit Dancer would, but I think we just want to start closing the game out here, reducing the amount of draw steps the opponent has left to be able to get themselves back into it. And yeah, opponent just keeps it up because they weren't able to take out the Hushbringer. So here I'd faced this player a couple times before. I think the current rank 2 and rank 3 are both playing my 4-color Samwise deck, which is great to see. So going into this match, that's kind of the matchup I assume they're on, especially because we see Lurrus straight away. And on the play, like, this hand can be a little risky, especially if I'm up against a deck that is running cards like Fatal Push or Shove Aside in high numbers. But since I've seen them on the 4-color Samwise deck a number of times before, and they don't really have much main deck interaction outside of Goblin Bombardment, I feel pretty safe keeping this hand. It does rely pretty heavily on Spirit Dancer surviving, but like I said, because I have a little bit of information about what they've run in the past, I feel pretty confident keeping this on the play if I am against the 4-color Sam deck. So opponent thinking about their mulligan here, but our curve out is pretty simple here. Just Vantage on 1, into either Forge or Pathway on 2. I almost always put Pathway on the white side if I've already got a red mana, because we don't have that many red cards, and oftentimes we will want to cast multiple white spells in a turn. But so they lead on Trap Finder and Sacred Foundry, so almost 100% certain they are still on the Samwise deck. And having double Sheltered by Ghost here is huge, because one of the weaknesses of that deck is, if they can, if you can keep them off their combo pieces, oftentimes that's good enough to win. So they go with a Ajani on turn 2, which is pretty interesting, because typically when I use Sheltered by Ghosts, and the opponent has an Ajani in play, obviously you want to take out one of the Ajani or the token. The advantage of taking out the Ajani is obviously that if they have a second one, they don't flip it immediately. Here I choose to take out the token, which I think, is better if you're expecting the Spirit Dancer to die, but looking back on it now, like I said, we're against the 4-color Sam deck. They don't have it. If they're on the exact list that I posted, they have no real interaction outside of bombardment. And also another reason is that if they have Birthing Ritual in play, they can use a Johnny to get another 2-drop. I guess it doesn't really matter here because they've got Trap Finder, which is the better card to sack for a 2-drop. But I think looking back on it, it makes more sense in this particular matchup for me to take out the Ajani rather than the token. Especially because they can now flip it. But I mean, them flipping it does now enable me to just win because we have another Sheltered by Ghost here. But I think with the information we had at the time, looking back on it now, it would have been slightly better for me to take out the Ajani just because they don't have much removal, so we don't really get punished for it. But either way, we have double Sheltered by Ghost, so we can just take out the Trap Finder and attack him for lethal. So obviously we had, a pretty ideal start there. Post sideboard, we obviously want to bring in the Hushbringers here. It's even better in this matchup than against Mardu. You can see here I'm already bringing in one Pithing Needle, but again, same sideboard strategy against the 4-color Sam deck. I think I consider cutting Sentinel's Eyes here, but going forwards... Oh, I also consider cutting Hammerhand. I'm not sure about that one. But yeah, going forwards in both the Mardu Sacrifice and the 4-color Sam deck, my favourite sideboard strategy is just cut 2 Sentinels for 2 Pithing Needles. I'm very surprised looking back on it now that I didn't bring in the second needle specifically in this matchup, because it's even better here because you can name Cauldron Familiar just to shut off the combo in addition to Goblin Bombardment. So drawing it in multiples is actually good here. So yeah, very shocked looking back on it that I didn't bring in 2 needles here. But yeah, going forwards, if you do play this deck against either Mardu or 4-color, cut the Emp Raptor for 4 Hushbringer and then cut 2 Sentinels for Needle is my current sideboard strategy, and I feel pretty good about that. So post sideboard, they are likely going to have Fragment Reality as interactions, so we can't keep those sorts of hands like we did game 1 as freely, but I still think this hand is pretty good, right? We have Sentinel on 1 here, into Spirit Dancer on 2. You could maybe consider plotting Ruckus on turn 1 if you're worried about, if you're worried about Goblin Bombardment specifically, but even then, I'm not really sure that's the best line. So they got Haywire Might, which I don't think is particularly good in this matchup. Obviously, they can use it to take out your best aura at any given time, but I don't think it's that good. I guess here, this would have been a situation where plotting Ruckus on turn 1 would have been better, because if they do have Bombardment, they can take out the Spirit Dancer, which they do end up having. So looking back on it now, I mean, obviously they did end up having the Bombardment, but I think it would have been better, because I don't think Sentinel's that good in this matchup, really, to plot the Ruckus on turn 1. Although, having said that, if they then had Fragment Reality, that would have been a lot worse. So I'm not 100% sure what the best line. I think it is very close out of those 2 lines. So here we've got Hammerhand, and I think it makes sense to target the Spirit Dancer here, because we forced them to sacrifice 2 creatures. You could make the argument to targeting the Sentinel to force them to sack a creature to take out the Sentinel, and then they have less creatures alive to kill the Spirit Dancer, but I think it makes more sense here to target the Spirit Dancer. We still get to draw 2, we still get to keep Sentinel in play, so if they do want to play something like a Birthing Ritual, which they hit here, they then either have to pay the Sentinel tax or we get to draw a card. So yeah, interesting start. I'm still not 100% sure. I think on balance, since we know they're likely to have Fragment Reality in here, it's better to lead on Sentinel on 1, because plot Ruckus into Spirit Dancer is very risky against a Fragment Reality. But they go for the Birthing Ritual here, and then they go for a second one. So it makes sense why they didn't pay the Sentinel tax, obviously, if they want to get both rituals in play this turn. And then this is pretty scary, because they do threaten going for the combo here. And I think I make a horrendous misplay here. I end up blocking with the Spirit Dancer. I'm not sure why. I think my thought process in the moment was, okay, well, if they sacrifice the Haywire Might, they can't use the Birthing Ritual. But if they hit an Ajani off this Birthing Ritual, they can just sacrifice the token and kill the Spirit Dancer anyway. So that was just a horrendous misplay on my part. I don't know what I was thinking. And they do end up hitting the Ajani. So now they can sacrifice the token to kill the Spirit Dancer and either flip the Ajani into a Planeswalker, which isn't that great, or just keep the Ajani round for the second Birthing Ritual trigger. Like, taking 1 is just completely negligible here. That was really stupid of me. So yeah, they kill the Spirit Dancer, which could have been completely avoided here, right? Even if they do hit Ajani, if they do want to take out the Spirit Dancer, they'd have to sacrifice both, which would then stop them getting this additional Birthing Ritual trigger, which does end up being a pretty big hit, right? They have a second Ajani now. which is really bad because now we want to play the Hushbringer ideally, and if they'd only have one creature in play, we could have gone Hushbringer into Ruckus, which then, you know, they can play around now, right? Because they can, they could have used both creatures to take out the Sentinel. So they don't kill the Hushbringer here though, which I'm pretty happy about. Now we can put a Ruckus on the Hushbringer, but yeah, you know, if that one misplay of just blocking with the Spirit Dancer has allowed them to end with a flip to Ajani where they would have just not had one at all. And also Spirit Dancer would have likely, you know, been alive. They might not have had the second Birthing Ritual trigger. And now if they have any other creatures, they can kill the Hushbringer. So yeah, that was a really stupid misplay. And so they used thankfully they don't have another creature here, which is very lucky for us. You know, we didn't get massively punished for our misplay because the opponent didn't have that many creatures. They end up using the Ajani to ping down the Hushbringer just in case they hit another Ajani off these Birthing Rituals, I guess, right? They need 2 creatures to take out the Hushbringer. And the nice thing about having Hushbringer in play here is that, you know, we deny them the Trap Finder death trigger as well. So, and thankfully they don't hit another Ajani. Having said that, they've already played 2 this game so far, so not super high odds that they would find it. Either way, we can get the Spirit Dancer in play here. We definitely want to take out this Ajani for sure. And then we don't really have to worry about the Samwise here because the Hushbringer just completely shuts it off. And then I think the goal here is to just, you know, make this Hushbringer big enough that it can't be killed by the bombardment. So at this point, it's already 5 toughness that will go up to 6 toughness because of the Ethereal Armor. So I like putting the Ruckus on the Spirit Dancer now, so then the Spirit Dancer is also out of range of bombardment. Because I think, you know, making Hushbringer, what would it be, like a 7/7 rather than a 5/6, doesn't make you any more resilient to bombardment. It just makes you more vulnerable to Fragment Reality. So I like my position here, but again, you know, we got very lucky to be in this position because the opponent didn't have an additional creature to kill the Hushbringer last turn. But having said that, if I hadn't made a really stupid misplay and blocked with that Spirit Dancer, then we'd be in basically the same spot even if the opponent did have creatures there. So if I'd played better, you know, I don't think it would have mattered even if the opponent did have a slightly better setup. So opponent does have Haywire Might here, which they can use to exile the Ethereal Armor. So I believe they can potentially ping the Hushbringer down if they get good hits here, right? Because if they take down the Ethereal Armor, we have 3 auras in play, right? So it will go down to a 2/3. Which would then enable them to ping it down, but then they'd have to sacrifice basically their whole board in order to do it. Again, in normal circumstances, them getting a Ajani here would be good because that would give them, you know, allow them to get an extra creature in play to sacrifice to the bombardment, but obviously Hushbringer shuts off the ETB on that as well, so, you know, hopefully this shows just how good Hushbringer is against these sorts of sacrifice decks. So opponent sacrifices the Trap Finder. They do hit an Ajani, like I said, which would have been good had the Hushbringer not shot off the ETB. So the opponent could have, like I said, used the Haywire Might to take out the Ethereal Armor, which is what they do here. Again, we deny them the life gain death trigger, which doesn't really make too much of a difference, but if they do want to take out the Hushbringer here, they have to sacrifice all 3 of their creatures. They let the Birthing Ritual trigger happen first, though. Maybe they're trying to find like a Cauldron Familiar where having that in the graveyard would be useful. And then here's a situation where having, you know, being in red and getting access to Sunbaked Canyon makes a huge difference. We hit a Shield Mage's Rescue, which is a really big card, well, a really big pickup here because it enables us, if they do choose to sacrifice their board to kill the Hushbringer, we can protect it, which is pretty big. And we find Giver of Runes, so now that's pretty big as well because I think if they are going to use the bombardment to kill the Hushbringer, they've basically got this turn cycle to do it because otherwise we can use the Giver of Runes to protect it. Now, giving Hushbringer protection from red will make the Demonic Ruckus fall off. So if they do ping it down first, you know, if they do ping it twice, then that's a way that they could kill it with the Hushbringer. But basically what I'm trying to do here is force them to sacrifice 2 creatures to try and kill the Hushbringer. Then we Shield Mage's Rescue on the 3rd. And even if they do sacrifice another creature to kill it, they're so far behind at that point because we've denied them all the death triggers. You know, they would need to play 2 other creatures this turn in order to not sacrifice the Lurrus, which would just leave them completely empty boarded. We still get to draw off the Spirit Dancer trigger, even if the opponent kills the Hushbringer in response, and we also get to draw an additional card if the opponent, if the Hushbringer dies because of the Demonic Ruckus as well. So the opponent does ping down the Hushbringer with the Unlucky Witness. Then again with the with the Haywire Might, and then there is a consideration maybe to use Shield Mage's Rescue now, but I don't think it really makes much of a difference unless they've got a third creature in play already. So they now sacrifice the Samwise. Now we go for the Shield Mage's Rescue again, and if they want to kill the Hushbringer here, they have to sacrifice the Lurrus, which then draws us a card off the Demonic Ruckus. So even with a really bad misplay that ended up putting us pretty far behind, we ended up winning that one, which is pretty sick. So here we're on the draw, and obviously you got to ship back any hand that doesn't have a creature. This hand is much better though. We can put back a Giver of Runes and then have Giver on 1, Lightfalls on 2, and we got Shard Mage's Rescue and Sheltered by Ghost, which is pretty sick. And then we see Temple Garden into Delighted Halflings, so almost certainly going to be against Mono Green Devotion here, which is a really good matchup for Auras. You know, even before the new upgrades, Auras was a really good matchup here because they just don't have any way to interact. You can race really quickly. They are playing the White Splash though, which makes me almost... well, very confident that they've got Portable Hole in the sideboard that they can fetch with Karn, but we've already got Giver of Runes in play, which is one of the best cards in the matchup. Now, having said that, if you do have to use Giver to give protection from white, it will make all of your white auras fall off, which is an issue, but, you know, they would need exactly Karn into Portable Hole for that even to come up in the first place, and in most scenarios, you're going to be using Giver of Runes to give your creature protection from green to be able to attack in anyway. But yeah, very happy with this start. We got double Sheltered by Ghosts, so even if the opponent does get something big down, we can answer it straight away. We got Ethereal Armor to be able to start racing pretty quickly. Light Pause is also really nice because it can, you know, we can tutor up auras that give us evasion or trample fairly easily as well. So opponent does lead on Portable Hole here. Presumably they have to take out the Giver of Runes though, right? Because we can just protect the Light Pause otherwise. But this is pretty nice because it just gives us free reign to kill the Karn here. And then we can also take out one of their ramp creatures. There is maybe a consideration to using Sheltered by Ghost to take out the Portable Hole here. But I think it makes more sense to take out one of their creatures just to deny their proactive game plan, right? It cuts them off potentially going for Storm the Festival next turn. And I think, looking back on it, I like taking out Birds of Paradise here, which is what I end up going for, just because it takes out a potential flying blocker, which is fairly relevant. And then I think I like going for Demonic Ruckus here, looking back on it. Yeah, I do go for Demonic Ruckus because we do need to be able to attack past their blockers, and having lost Giver of Runes, that is one of the ways that we could do that. Now, typically, I prefer, you know, a lot of the time I will go for the Ethereal Armor first, but we already have a second Sheltered by Ghosts, which we can use, and also Shard Mage's Rescue, which we can use to tutor up Ethereal Armor, so I don't think we're in a massive rush to do that, really. Again, we could have gone for Shard Mage's Rescue into Ethereal Armor here, but I think I prefer just going for another Sheltered by Ghosts here, just to cut them off halfling, just in case they have, you know, a top-end expensive card that will allow them to kind of storm off, because before having Hushbringer, there is a chance the opponent can go over the top with a very powerful, you know, start. You know, Devotion can be very explosive with their powerful curve outs. So here we go for Ethereal Armor. Opponent taps down the halfling and has priority, so I assume this must be a Besager in the moment, which it does end up being, I think. So interesting what the opponent wants to take out here. I think Ethereal Armor will buy them more time, but they can obviously take out one of these Sheltered by Ghosts in order to get back one of their mana dorks if they do have, like, you know, a top-end expensive card that they want to have a little bit more acceleration for. So they do end up using the Besager to get back a halfling, but this also enables us to get an extra land in play in order to use Ethereal Armor to buff our creature even more. So I don't know if that was really worth it. I mean, if we didn't already have Trample, then I think I understand that line from the opponent, but considering we already have Trample, I don't really think that line makes much sense because it allows us to race even further, and they only get back a Delighted Halfling. So here, since we have Menace, we can just attack in for 15. They go down to 3. And now we've got Shard Mage's Rescue, which we can use to get Griff's Boon. And then they you know, not only do we have Trample, which is, you know, going to be basically impossible for them to stop, but we also have Menace and Flying as well. So, and I assume, you know, they've only got one Portable Hole in the sideboard, so even if they have Karn and Portable Hole and they can pay the ward too, I don't think they'll have access to another one. So unless they have a way to go infinite here, we should just be winning the following turn. Unless they can find a way to get, like, you know, 4 Cavalier of Thorns into play here. But even then, I think Shard Mage's Rescue fetch Griff's Boon beats that anyway, so... But yeah, as you can see, they just don't really have great ways of interacting here. They do get a Karn, they do get an extra mana off the Trailblazers, so if they did have Portable Hole, then they could make white mana. But again, we've got Ward 2 off the Sheltered by Ghost, which is why the card is just so crazy. Like, you know, the O-Ring part is already way above rate for 2 mana. The fact you also get Lifelink and Ward 2 is so good in spots like this. They do get Haywire Might, and they do have an extra land, though, so that is a potential out here, right? They can take out the Ethereal Armor and also gain 3 life as well. So if we do Shard Mage's Rescue for Griff's Boon, that is a potential way that they can play around that. But they preemptively activate the Haywire Might, which has to be a mistake, right? Because they could use it to, you know, wait to see what we play first. But I mean, either way, I think even if they did keep the Haywire Might around and then used it at instant speed to take out the Ethereal Armor, we're still probably just going to win here anyway, right? We could just wait. We could attack first, wait for them to crack the Haywire Might, and then use the Shard Mage's Rescue in response to get another Ethereal Armor. So I don't think it really ends up mattering. But yeah, either way, got their game 1. Definitely a good matchup for us. So here we definitely want the Hushbringers over the Amped Raptors. And even though Pithing Needle is typically a good card in this matchup, I think Fragment Reality is just much better at both taking out their early ramp and also, you know, taking out their bigger creatures like Cavalier of Thorns if we need to attack. Now I end up cutting Demonic Ruckus and Sentinel's Eyes here, which I don't like. Again, like in the other matchup, what I end up doing against Devotion going forwards is just trimming on Esper Sentinels, because again, I think Sentinel has utility in this matchup for sure, especially if you're on the play and they have a turn 1 Utopia Sprawl, which they just have to play into. But they generate so much mana that it's fairly easy for them to play around the Sentinel tax. So what I typically do going forwards now, if you're playing this matchup, is replace the Amped Raptor with Hushbringer and then just cut 3 Sentinels for 3 Fragment Realities, because you don't want to be short on auras in this matchup. You really need to be able to race above anything else. So yeah, looking back on it in this matchup, I was still kind of figuring out the sideboard plan. If you do pick up this deck, typically what I like to do is just cut the Sentinels for Fragment Realities. So here, again, same sort of thing as the Sacrifice matchup. You want to get Hushbringer down as early as possible, just because it really slows down their proactive game plan here, right? Shuts off the ETB on Cavalier, shuts off the ETB on the Kiora passive, and outcast the Trailblazer as well. So even though they could have a pretty explosive turn here, Hushbringer does limit it slightly. And then next time we've got a reasonable play of Light Paws into Ethereal Armor. I am a little bit worried because Fnatic is one of their best ways to play around Hushbringer. I think their main way of beating a Hushbringer is just getting a ton of creatures into play very quickly, or just generating an insane amount of mana, right? They can still use Fnatic to make 4 mana without needing the ETBs off Cavalier and stuff like that, so definitely a little scared because the opponent does have a potentially fast start if they can just play, a 3-drop that gets Fnatic online into like a Storm the Festival, for example, right? That would be a really powerful line. But the fact the opponent's in the tank here makes me think in the moment they don't have anything that crazy. Now they do have Khan, and I believe, I can't remember if I checked it or not, but I believe the Utopia Sprawl, I do check it. The Utopia Sprawl's on green, so even if they have a portable hole here, they can't use it because they don't have any green mana. But they end up grabbing the 1 ring, which I'm pretty happy to see. Obviously, that does limit what we do a tiny bit, but, 1 ring only buys them a single turn. We can just usually win the following turn, and we have another turn to develop as well. So definitely like putting the Ethereal Armor on the Hushbringer here, because we don't want them to get another card off the Khan, and then we can also get Hammerhand on the Light Paws, which enables us to attack with the Light Paws and prevent the Halfling from blocking, which then enables us to attack with the Sentinel in addition to it. So this, typically Hammerhand is at its best against decks like Control, where you can just, they tap out for a sweeper, and then you follow up with Light Paws into an aura into Hammerhand, attack for lethal. But spots like this where they have a Planeswalker as well, it's also a very effective tool here at just allowing you to attack. And yeah, opponent just plays the 1 ring and then just scoops it up, because it's very difficult for Devotion to beat Hushbringer and auras in general. Okay, so here we're on the play. And yeah, this hand looks great, right? We've got Sentinel on 1, into Spirit Dancer on 2, which on the play is great. And then if they don't kill the Spirit Dancer straight away, we've got double Shard Mage's Rescue to protect it as well. So this hand looks pretty solid to me. So lead on the Sentinel, obviously, and then see what the opponent's on. No Lurus, no Gigantha either. So Thundering Falls makes me think we're probably against Jeskai Control, if I had to guess. You know, there's maybe a chance that it could be, you know, like a spell slinger deck, but the only one that really sees play right now is it Wizards, and that's usually a Gigantha deck, and they usually don't play any tap lands at all. So I'm pretty confident we're against a control deck of some sort, just not 100% sure what it is. Then we see Glacial Fortress, and, you know, pretty much confirms that we are against Jeskai. And they have Helix for Spirit Dancer, which does, you know, ideally we would like the Spirit Dancer to live, but we get a card off the Esper Sentinel, and we can also just start buffing the Esper Sentinel now as well, which makes it very difficult for the opponent to play around. Not only do we have Giver to back it up, but we also have Shard Mage's Rescue as well. So if the opponent does spend a turn, you know, not paying the Sentinel tax and trying to kill it, we can kind of blow them out with the Shard Mage's Rescue. The one thing we are worried about here, though, is a sweeper, especially Divine Purge. I mean, even a distraction-based sweeper here would be a bit awkward. So the opponent has Flage, so now we can just use the Shard Mage's Rescue in response, which is a complete blowout. Not only do they not gain the life, but we also get to keep the Sentinel alive. And then the two options we've got here is using Hammerhand and keeping Shard Mage's Rescue up, or putting Lurrus into hand. And like I said, the one thing I'm really worried about here is a sweeper. Even if they have two removal spells here, we can fizzle the first one with Giver of Runes and also draw a card off the Esper Sentinel. So I feel like on balance, I much prefer putting Lurrus into hand here just because it plays around a sweeper better. And with Giver in play, we already have protection. We don't necessarily need to go for the Shard Mage's Rescue here. So here, I mean, we could use Lurrus to put Spirit Dancer into play, but like I said, the main thing I'm worried about from this point in the game is a sweeper. And so I think it makes sense for us to just play a bit slowly and just hold on to Lurrus here as a way to recover if they do tap out for a sweeper here. Just keep buffing the Sentinel, force us to keep drawing cards, because, you know, they're not really close to escaping Flage, which is another way they could potentially kill the Sentinel here. But either way, I feel like we're in a really good spot here. And we're also in a spot where we don't need to overextend here, right? We've got a 6/6 Esper Sentinel in play that's going to keep drawing us cards. We've got Giver of Runes to protect it as well. So I feel like the key here is to just not overextend too much, be able to play around a sweeper, which is the opponent's only real way of getting back into the game here, and just apply pressure, because not only are they going to be taking a ton of damage from the Esper Sentinel here, but they're also going to be taking damage off their own ring as well. So they do find a Helix. If they have an untapped land here, they could potentially hit the Giver of Runes, although we do have Shard Mage's Rescue to protect it, and I would use the Rescue to protect Giver of Runes here, because Giver of Runes is essentially a constant protection spell, but thankfully for us, they didn't have a land and had to use Lorien Reveal to fetch one. So I feel pretty good about this spot. And now I believe with this Light Pause and the Hammer Hand here that we should have enough to put them down to 1, if I remember correctly, which then just leaves them dead to the 1 ring. Obviously, they could have Lightning Helix in the upkeep to keep them alive, but even that would draw us another card. It would tap them out of 2 of their mana. So we get Griff's Boon. We can also use the Shard Mage's Rescue here. Unfortunately, we are completely out of tutorable auras. So I don't believe there's another option that we can put on Light Pause unless we had a 2-mana aura, but we can still attack in here for 15, I believe. Puts them down to 1. Even if they have Lightning Helix, that basically taps them out of a range to use a sweeper. And presumably if they don't have a Helix, they have to tap the ring to cast one, in which case they'll definitely be tapped out of a sweeper. I guess if they had a Helix in hand, they could Helix and then Divine Purge, but then even then that's best possible. They're still taking 2 from the ring next turn, and we could use Lurrus to get back another creature. So game 1 went really well, which is decent because control can be a tricky matchup. I think being on the play there is a very big deal. So this is a matchup where we want Lorien's Escape, and then Needle is also pretty nice. You know, now we know that they're running the 1 ring. Kneeling the ring is also going to be very effective, I think. Typically, I actually like bringing 2 Pithing Needles in this matchup, and I like trimming down to 1 Sheltered by Ghost. I like having the 1 remaining because it's very important to be able to tutor off Light Pause, right? If they have a 1 ring, a Teferi, or an escaped Flage, being able to tutor the Sheltered by Ghost is very nice, but even though it provides the Ward 2, I don't think it's worth playing in the majority of situations unless the opponent's playing like Doorkeeper Thrall or something, because 2 mana just for Lifelink and Ward 2 isn't that good in this matchup, and I prefer to have cheaper protective options like Loran's Escape as well. But yeah, I think in future, again, this was another match where I was playing against control for one of the first times. I think I like bringing in a second Needle here as well, just because one of their main ways of actually pulling ahead of us in terms of card advantage is via the 1 ring. I feel like this particular variant of the deck is very good at being able to, you know, get ahead or recover in terms of card advantage, if that makes sense. So this hand is a little bit it's a borderline keep, basically. Obviously, Esper Sentinel as our only creature isn't ideal, but it is one of our best turn 1 plays, and if they don't kill it immediately, we can start suiting it up. Even if they do kill it immediately, they need a 1 mana removal spell to not pay the tax, which can hopefully dig us towards another. Now we're in a tricky spot, though, since we don't have Shard Mage's protection or Loran's Escape, where if they have a removal spell here, they could potentially blow us out in combat. But even if they have a Helix here, we still get to draw 1 card, so it's still card neutral at least. But unfortunately, they have the Fragment Reality, which kind of sucks. So we do end up getting punished for the borderline keep here. I mean, we do still have Sunbaked Canyon, we do still have Lurrus as well, but Lurrus doesn't actually buy us anything back from the graveyard because they exiled the Esper Sentinel with the Fragment Reality. So pretty rough start, but you know, looking back on it, I think I would keep that hand in a decent number of situations, because either the Sentinel lives, in which case we can suit it up and start getting card advantage, or most likely if it does die, we have, you know, a lot of the time we will get at least 1 card draw off the Sentinel. You know, we didn't in this situation because the opponent had exactly Fragment Reality, but we are running a decent number of creatures. We're not unlikely to draw another one, and thankfully we do find another Sentinel off the top. We get to get the Ethereal Armor down, which means that, you know, the opponent would need a 2 mana piece of interaction here to not pay the tax. And unfortunately, they have Pyroclasm, which is, you know, not very good against us in the majority of situations. Obviously, it will be good if we go like, you know, Sentinel on 1 into another creature on turn 2. But it's very, very easy for our creatures to outscale Pyroclasm. So I'm actually kind of happy to see them bring that in, as opposed to a card like Divine Purge, which is really good against us. Unfortunately, the opponent does have the ring, though, and they get to activate it here. I mean, we can, if they are completely tapped out here, so we can go Lurrus into Esper Sentinel here, which I think is the line. There's maybe an argument for going Lurrus and Giver, but then you're missing out on getting the card from the graveyard. And then I also like playing the Ruckus on the Esper Sentinel again, just to make it more difficult for the opponent to play around the tax, make it more likely that we can get a card out of this deal. But yeah, with the opponent having the 1 ring in play, we're not really pressuring their life total. It's looking pretty rough here. And if they are running a build with like Stifle, for example, they could potentially go, you know, Flage, Stifle, attack with the Arena of Glory. Unfortunately, they do have Divine Purge, though, which I really didn't want to see. We do get to draw a card off the Demonic Ruckus, but Divine Purge is definitely one of the best cards against our deck. And running Boros, that is one of the tricky things. Like, if you were running Azorius, for example, then getting access to Spell Pierce would be a good way that you could play around a card like Divine Purge. Obviously, you can run Mana Tithe, and there are some other cards that can protect your board, like Teferi's Protection, but 3 mana is so overpriced for that sort of effect. And to be honest, you know, we can beat Divine Purge in longer games. You know, that's one of the reasons why I like bringing in 2 Pithing Needles going forwards, because if we need all the ring here, or if they had a Teferi and we had that on lock, then I think we can actually outgrind Control, because we have Lurrus, because we have Sunbaked Canyon, because, you know, we have a lot of ways to play into longer games. Amped Raptor is a really good top deck in those sorts of situations as well. So it's not an unbeatable card, so I don't think it's worth splashing a 3rd colour just to beat. But, you know, it is a tricky card to stop. So here, opponent has Prismatic Ending, and I definitely think it's worth using the Shard Mage's Rescue here to protect the Giver. Because, like I said, if the Giver gets to survive, it's basically like a permanent removal spell. A permanent protection spell. And if they do have a 2nd removal spell, that's fine. We've just basically baited out 2 removal spells, and the Sentinel has a much higher chance of living here. But yeah, the 1 ring is definitely the big difference maker here. Had they not drawn, you know, basically 5 or 6 cards off this already, I think we would have had a much better chance. So that's kind of the reason why I think, you know, you can sort of go 1-for-1 with Control, because you have a lot of ways to produce card advantage, but if they get their engines online, like the 1 ring or like Teferi, then that's really difficult to race against. So yeah, I think going into game 2, I do end up bringing in the 2nd Needle, but going forwards, if I do face Control, I want to bring in the 3 Loran's Escape and 2 Pithing Needle as well. We do find Amped Raptor off the top, which finds a Spirit Dancer. So this is what I mean, that Raptor is a good top deck in spots like these as well. And then we can Shelter by Ghost, taking out the 1 ring, which is kind of risky, because if the Esper Sentinel dies, then they get the ring back, and they also don't take as much damage off it. But honestly, at this point in the game, when they're at 15, I think it's more relevant that they're not drawing 4 cards every turn, rather than, you know, taking less damage off the ring, if that makes sense. Now, obviously, in this spot, we're very, very vulnerable to a sweeper, but, you know, you can't play around everything. I think in this sort of spot, we just have to, you know, apply as much pressure as we can. And if the opponent does have a slightly slower hand or they don't have a sweeper, we can then win from that, right? In this sort of spot, you just can't afford to play around the second Divine Purge, for example. But we're in a decent spot. Obviously, Amp Raptor finding Spirit Dancer was a huge pickup there and kind of got us back in the game. And then obviously we still have access to Lurrus as well. They do have Pyroclasm, which unfortunately takes out 2 of our creatures here, but the Sentinel still survives, which is a pretty big deal, because obviously this card, you know, this Sentinel has already drawn us multiple cards, and that is, you know, one of the main reasons why we're still able to keep up in terms of card advantage. And the fact the Sentinel hasn't died yet means they don't have the 1 ring back as well, which is pretty big, but unfortunately they do also have Helix, but this does completely tap them out as well. So this coming turn, we can either play Amp Raptor or Lurrus, and I think I end up playing Amp Raptor, which looking back on, I'm not sure I like. I think I would much rather play Lurrus while they're tapped out, because if they have a counter spell, I would much rather have the follow-up Amp Raptor counter than the Lurrus. And the other advantage of going Lurrus is if it does survive the turn cycle, and we can play Core Spirit Dancer, then playing Amp Raptor is way higher impacts, because if we do hit an aura off it, we can then equip, you know, we can trigger the Spirit Dancer, for example, so I think looking back on it now, I should have played the Lurrus while the opponent was tapped out and then held on to Amp Raptor as a follow-up. So if the Lurrus does survive, we get to trigger our creature more often. And if the Lurrus doesn't survive, then, you know, we still get Amp Raptor. And if we do manage to find the haste aura, for example, we can actually attack with it because the Lurrus will be tapped. So even though we do get to draw a card off the Demonic Ruckus here, I think looking back on it, I should have played the Lurrus there instead. And now the opponent has Flage, they've got a Stacks Graveyard, and they have Arena of Glory, so we're in trouble here. Having said that though, even if they do escape the Flage, we still have the line of untapped land into Lurrus, into Sheltered by Ghost to get rid of the Flage, but, you know, especially post-sideboard, the opponent's going to have a ton of spot removal, and they're going to, you know, see at least 3 cards off the 1 ring before we even get to untap with the Lurrus, and they're going to be at 23 life as well, so very unlikely that'll end up getting us back into this game, but, you know, it's worth playing it out. There is always a chance against control that they just draw a bunch of lands and they don't find spot removal when they need it, so we are going to go for that line here. You know, play Sunbaked Canyon into Lurrus, into Sheltered by Ghost, and we do draw a Spirit Dancer off the top as well, so if we do get incredibly lucky and the opponent just has a bunch of lands in hand, then we do stand a chance, which is pretty impressive that we managed to hold on to this game for so long, because we didn't have a particularly impressive start, right? If you remember, our only creature in Esper Sentinel got killed pretty early on, and we had to dig for more creatures in the early game, which isn't ideal against control, right? You really want to get off to a very fast start in this matchup if possible. So we do get to take out the Flage, we do get Wards 2 on the Lurrus, which makes spot removal a little bit more tricky. If they have to use a card like Iteration to dig towards removal, then we might still stand a chance in this game, but, you know, chances are, you know, if they find any sweeper, that gets them the Flage back, which then just deals lethal. If they kill Lurrus at any point here, they just have lethal. However, if we do get to untap with Lurrus, we get in to connect for 4 damage and we get to gain 4 life back, which then means that we're not just dead to them killing the Lurrus. And surprisingly, they didn't find a removal spell, so their hand must have just been, you know, more ways to dig and lands and stuff, which, you know, is going to happen sometimes against control, but we end up getting a bit of a break here, but I still say we're on the back foot. Opponent's still at 22, we're still at 3, so we're playing to survive at the moment, but we do get to untap with Lurrus, which gives us a really big option of cards to play out the graveyard. Definitely going to lead on the Core Spirit Dancer here to try and turn some of these auras into card advantage. And the opponent has Spell Snare, which is pretty awkward. So I definitely want to put an Ethereal Armor on the Lurrus here. That's my next play. I don't think it's really worth it playing another creature. I just want to gain some life back. But I'm going to crack the Sunbaked Canyon first, just in case we find a Core Spirit Dancer or a Light Pause. And thankfully we do find a Light Pause, which is really nice here. So now we can play the Light Pause, put Ethereal Armor on the Lurrus, and then fetch up a Hammer Hands onto the Light Pause, which then gives it haste and allows us to attack him for more damage. So now we've got 2 essentially must-kill threats in play, and we're back in the game, right? Although having said that, if Lurrus dies here to sort of anything, they can then just escape Flage from the graveyard. So when Lurrus dies, they get Flage back, deals us 3 directly. Then they can just escape Flage with Arena of Glory, and they have a completely stacked graveyard, so they obviously have enough cards for the escape cost. So we're dead to so many cards, and obviously the last card they played last time was Lorien Revealed, so again, I would be shocked if we end up winning this game because any removal spell on Lurrus basically wins them the game. Now they have Flage, which basically wins them the game straight away. They end up missing lethal here though. Well, I mean, there's multiple ways they could deal lethal, but with Flage, they could just use Flage, deal 3 directly to face, then escape it with Arena of Glory and attack us directly, and that just wins them the game. So we should be dead to this Flage anyway, but in the moment I'm thinking, okay, opponents miss lethal here, we still have a chance potentially. So they then Helix the Lurrus, so they get Flage back again, and then they can use that Flage to kill Light Paws. So whilst they could have dealt lethal, this, kind of deals lethal another way, right? They gain an absurd amount of life back, so we're very unlikely to be able to kill them. So even though they didn't, immediately kill us, which they could have done, it basically just, makes it impossible for us to win from this point anyway. So they ship it back. We still have Giver of Runes. I'm still going to play it out, just in case they miss lethal again. But we crack the Sunbaked Canyon. We do find a Light Paws off the top, but unfortunately we've already used Hammer Hands, so we can't give the Light Paws haste. We can thankfully use Shard Mage's Rescue to protect it from the Flage trigger though. The opponent has Spell Snare. Still run out Giver of Runes. We're not completely dead, even to Arena of Glory on the Flage here, because if they escape the Flage with haste and they try to kill the Giver of Runes, we can just use Shard Mage's Rescue, which then keeps us, keeps the Giver of Runes around to be able to block, so we don't take the 6 damage off the Flage attacking. But, I'm pretty sure they could escape Flage twice here just to win, right? They can escape Flage, deal 3 from attacking, and then just escape the second one. And that's just from the information we have. If they have a Helix or any other removal spell for the Giver, then they basically win here. So opponent does escape Flage with haste. I believe they go face with this Flage trigger rather than going for Giver. Which makes me think, okay, they're just going to plan to escape the second Flage, or they've probably got a Lightning Helix in hand. So they go face again, puts us down to 3. And now we're just dead to, a second Flage escape or Lightning Helix. So Giver goes down, so yeah. But to be honest, I'm quite impressed that we managed to stay in this game for so long. Considering we had a pretty slow start, and the opponent started taking over the game in terms of card advantage with the One Ring fairly early on as well. So going into game 3, I believe I bring in the second Pithing Needle, which I like here. I do think it's if we can needle the One Ring and stop them putting ahead on card advantage, then there's a very good chance that we can actually outgrind them. But the annoying thing about Pithing Needle is it makes the card that's best against us even better in Divine Purge, right? Having your whole board swept by Divine Purge, including Pithing Needle, is so brutal. But, I think in Boros, we don't have that much great counterplay. And as you saw there, we did get Divine Purged and still had a chance in the game. So it is a very good card against you, but it's not unbeatable. So like I said earlier, I don't think it's worth splashing a third colour just for that specific card. And I think a lot of the control lists that I've faced are still playing stuff like Wrath of the Skies, which Loran's Escape can play around pretty nicely. So this is a pretty interesting turn, whether we want to run out a Spirit Dancer, a Light Paws, or potentially Amped Raptor. And I think I go for Amped Raptor here, which I don't mind because, presumably it will bait out some interaction here, right? We're going to start attacking him with just a 3/2 creature, which they probably have to deal with at some point. And I would much rather save these Light Paws and Spirit Dancers for turns where I can play an Aura the same turn. But I'm still not 100% sure what the best line is here. I don't mind it though. Getting these Amped Raptors down early basically, forces them to do something about it, whether that's a removal spell or a sweeper here. And then having Spirit Dancer or Light Paws as your follow-up play is way more difficult for the opponent to deal with, I think. So looking back on it, I actually think I like this play, right? I would much rather have Amped Raptor come down early and eat a removal spell than something like a Spirit Dancer or Light Paws. So as we see here, right, opponent taps out for a removal spell, which then leaves us open to potentially go Light Paws or Spirit Dancer or both next turn. So here, I think I like going for both of the Spirit Dancers because even if the opponent does have a sweeper here, we get to draw 2, which fuels our hand. Whereas if we invest in Light Paws, the card advantage goes onto the Light Paws itself, which makes us a lot more vulnerable to Light Pause getting killed. And the other nice thing about the Demonic Ruckus here is if they do use a sweeper, not only have we drawn 2 cards off the Spirit Dancer, but we also get to draw an additional card off the Ruckus as well. So it just gives us better follow-up play to the opponent sweeping the board, essentially. So they don't have a sweeper, which is huge. If they had Divine Purge, that does set us back a fair bit. They do have the Lightning Helix, which takes out one of the Spirit Dancers, but we still get to keep the other one, which is pretty big. Unfortunately, we don't have another Aura, though, which is a little bit awkward. So got a few plays here. We could crack the Sunbaked Canyon to try and find another one. We could put Lurrus into hand and play a Giver of Runes. We could put Lurrus into hand and play a Light Pause. We could put Light Pause and Giver into play. I think with Lurrus, I prefer going Giver of Runes in play and put Lurrus in hand, which is what I end up going for here. Just because getting Giver in play is very useful to protect the Spirit Dancer, and now we have good follow-up play to the Sweeper. So even though this is often a matchup where you want to get out to a fast start, because you have a lot of ways to grind into longer games, you can afford to get, put enough in play where the opponent has to deal with it, but then have good enough follow-up play that you can recover from a sweeper as well. Although we are getting closer to the point where we have to get worried about them escaping Flage here, because they're filling their graveyard up and they have Arena of Glory, which can be pretty brutal if they manage to do that. So the opponent does take out the Core Spirit Dancer, but we thankfully draw another card off the Ruckus. And then we've got a few options here. We could either go Lurrus, get back a creature, or we could go Light Pause, Lurrus, and then equip one of our 1-mana auras from the graveyard, which I think is the better play because we really want to try and outgrow a creature. Because if the opponent escapes Flage and attacks, that's, 6 damage. So I would much rather get a creature in play that outscales the 3 damage, so that if they do escape and attack with the Flage, presumably they have to take out the Lurrus. Or if they don't take out the Lurrus, they have to spend both of their Flage triggers taking out the Light Pause, which then enables Lurrus to survive. So I think it makes sense to go Shard Mage's Rescue here on the Light Pause. If we could buff the Lurrus's power to 4 with this 1-mana aura, then we would obviously use that instead. But I think it makes more sense to go for this on the Light Pause, and then we can use Hammer Hand to give the Light Pause haste and attack in. We could have obviously used Ethereal Armor there instead as well, but I feel like getting in for an extra 4 damage is pretty important there. They don't have quite enough cards in the graveyard yet to escape the Flage, so if they rely on a 2-mana removal spell like a Lightning Helix and they don't have another land, then they won't be able to escape it this turn as well. So getting in for the extra damage could help us race here as well, but I could definitely see the argument for going for Ethereal Armor there instead. Not 100% sure, but I still feel like we're in a pretty good spot here. And the opponent leaves on Seek New Knowledge, which is great for us, because that means that they can't get lands, so if they're missing land drops, they won't be able to escape Flage this turn. Even now, I believe that's the 6th card in their yard. Yeah, they've got 6 in the yard, so they could have escaped Flage. That is the one big weakness of Seek New Knowledge. It's a card I've run in a lot of decks before, and if you do miss lands, it's pretty brutal. So yeah, it looks like we're getting away with it this turn. The opponent isn't going to get to escape Flage here, which means that likely, unless they have a sweeper, which they probably would have played it last turn if they had it, or I guess they could have drawn it off the Seek New Knowledge, but it's fairly likely from this point that one of our 2 creatures is going to survive, which is pretty huge. So opponent uses Prismatic Ending on the Light Pause, which we've obviously got a second one already in hand to be able to go again. Obviously now though, we need to be very wary of the opponent escaping Flage. So got a few options, but I don't think, we've got enough mana where we can crack the Sunbaked Canyon first, and finding a Shard Mage's Rescue off the top is huge here, because that enables us to play around Flage way better, basically. So here we can go for Light Pause. Unfortunately, they end up having a Spell Snare, which kind of sucks, but here we can replay one of the creatures if we wanted to, or start equipping Lurrus with auras. I think I like playing a creature with this Shard Mage's Rescue here, though, because now if they escape Flage, presumably, well, I'm not even sure what they would target first, but whatever they target, we can use the Shard Mage's Rescue to protect, and then that creature is basically guaranteed to survive unless they have another instant speed removal spell, which they can use in response. And if they do target the Lurrus here, for example, we can then protect both of our creatures from the second Flage trigger, and I think it's more likely they do take out the Lurrus. So they do. If they don't have a removal spell here, we can rescue the Lurrus, which protects it, and then we can also get the Ethereal Armor on Light Pause here, making it a 4/4, which means they can't kill either of our creatures this turn, which is absolutely huge. So that top deck rescue, came in so clutch in this exact spot. I know the opponent doesn't even attack with the the Flage, which is huge for us. Spirit Dancer is a great draw off the top because we really want to be playing auras from the graveyard this turn. I think we want to go for the Demonic Ruckus here, because if we Demonic Ruckus on Lurrus, it puts it up to a 4 toughness creature, which then plays around future Flages and Lightning Helix, and then it also enables us to tutor up Sheltered by Ghosts on the Light Pause to get rid of this Flage for good, which is huge as well, right? They can't just escape it again later. And now we're attacking in for a huge amount of damage here, right? We're getting in for 12, which means that if they don't find a sweeper this turn, I think we're pretty good to win. Obviously, if they do have a Divine Purge, then that's going to be pretty rough. But at least with Divine Purge, we can replay the stuff from exile, and we draw a card off the Demonic Ruckus dying as well. They do have the One Ring, which is, obviously we'll save them for this turn. Helps them dig towards a sweeper. But they are also at 2, and they're already taking 1 off upkeep from the One Ring. So here, I think getting Spirit Dancer in play makes a lot of sense, because if they do have a spot removal spell, we can use Shardmage's Rescue to protect it. And even if they have a sweeper, we can rescue in response and draw 2 off the Spirit Dancer to try and recover. And we've obviously got Light Pause as a follow-up play as well. So even if they find a sweeper here, I think we've still got a decent chance. They're also just dead to their own ring in the upkeep. They can't Fragment Reality their own One Ring anymore. They do mill over a Flage, but they only have 3 cards in the yard, so they can't escape that yet. So even if they have best case scenario, I think we're still good. So they have Pyroclasm, which, like I said, earlier, they have to play this very early on for it to actually be effective. We have the protection spell for the core Spirit Dancer, which draws us 2, and then means that only 1 Spirit Dancer will die to this Pyroclasm. And then we can tutor up the Gryff Spoon, which isn't necessary, but if they do have a follow-up sweeper afterwards, then the Gryff Spoon in the graveyard is another thing that we can just cast in long games, and we end up getting there. So that was a really sick game. So here we queue into Nightox, who's a great streamer who's usually playing very high on the ladder. So I'll have a link down to their Twitch page in the description if you want to check them out. But before I recorded this game, I believe I just queued into them and they were playing Mardu Sacrifice. So seeing Lurrus here basically gives me, I'm pretty confident they'll be on the same deck, which is useful information to have. Now this hand is a little land heavy, but I think Amptraptor specifically is very nice at unlocking these sorts of hands because it's an inherent 2-for-1. It can help dig you towards your core Spirit Dancer or Light Pause more consistently. And even if it hits an aura, it enables you to just start doing your proactive thing a little bit better, which is especially nice after a turn 1 Sentinel, right? If you go Amptraptor on turn 2, you can then suit up the Sentinel, which then makes it more difficult for the opponent to play around. So opponent has Unlucky Witness into Trap Finder, and they keep a mana open, which makes me think that they potentially have a Corrupted Conviction here. So rather than just jamming the Amptraptor, I prefer getting the Sentinel down here because it makes them casting their, the cards that help the deck spin their wheels, like Corrupted Conviction and Deadly Dispute, more awkward. And just generally, it's almost always better to get Sentinel down earlier in the game while the opponent has access to less mana, because it makes it more difficult for them to play around the Sentinel. So here, even though we haven't got a Spirit Dancer or a Light Pause, I still like our position because we can go Amptraptor next turn. And yeah, they got Village right, so kind of what I suspected here. And I'm very happy if they spend their next turn just, paying for the Sentinel tax, because not only does that mean that they're denied the cards they hit off the Unlucky Witness, but it also means that they're just very slow to commit to the board. So it enables us to race, obviously Amptraptor is slower than Light Pause or Core Spirit Dancer, even though we end up hitting a Light Pause here. But, it's still decent at setting up our proactive game plan. We already have the Demonic Ruckus set up here, so yeah, opponent just scoops it up. Sentinel put in work there, especially against slower hands from the opponent. So here we definitely want the Hushbringer over the Amptraptor, and even though Sentinel was good in that specific instance, if they're not reliant on cards like Village Rites or Corrupted Conviction to unlock their hand, then Sentinel on average isn't that good in this matchup. Obviously that last game was an example where it was very good, but especially against Goblin Bombardment, Sentinel can be a little bit of a liability. By the way, taking game 1 is always a big deal in this matchup because I do think you become a lot better post-sideboard with the addition of Hushbringer. Again, they're likely to be bringing in more spot removal against you, and if Auras does pick up as a deck, obviously other decks will adapt by sideboarding more spot removal against you, but you've still got Giver of Runes and Shardmage's Rescue, and also Loran's Escape out the sideboard to protect your creatures, so you've still got decent counterplay. Now this hand is obviously very 2-drop heavy, but 2 Hushbringers, Hushbringer is just your best card in the matchup, so you definitely want to keep a hand like this for sure. Because even if they do have a Claim the First one or Fatal Push, they then need a way to kill the second one. Drawing Sentinel off the top is also very nice here. Gives us a decent play to go on turn 1. punishes them for playing, bombardment on 2, which, is a decent line for them because they can then kill the Sentinel and pick up another card off the Trap Finder, which kind of offsets the card they would give us off the Sentinel. But like I said last game, or last match where we were playing this matchup, you just want to get the Hushbringer down as early as possible, just because it shuts off, a number of their potential lines. And they do have the bombardment here, so they can, especially if they don't pay the Sentinel tax, they presumably have another creature here. They can just sacrifice the token, and I would assume the Marionette Apprentice to take down the Hushbringer here. I can't remember exactly what they do, but presumably they want to do this because then it's, they keep both of the other creatures that have death triggers around for the bombardment. So here we obviously want to play Hushbringer, and it's a little bit awkward when they already have 2 creatures in play because we really want to keep this Hushbringer alive. So rather than shocking in the Sacred Foundry, which was kind of telegraphed that we have another aura, I think I like playing the Hushbringer first here because then there's a chance that they use the bombardment to kill the Sentinel to get a trigger off the Unlucky Witness or Trap Finder, which would then enable us to play Ethereal Armor on the Hushbringer, requiring them to have to get another 2 creatures in play to kill the Hushbringer. Because what we don't want them to do here is, I would much rather them sacrifice a creature now. If we play the Hushbringer, then we're kind of in an awkward situation where if we play the Ethereal Armor on the Hushbringer, they can sacrifice the Witness and the Trap Finder in response to kill the Hushbringer. I guess the opponent doesn't want to do that though, because then they're denied both the death triggers. So they do end up going for it, which is huge for us. Because now we get the Hushbringer in play, they can't kill it with the bombardment. We can turn it into a 2/3 here. And even if the opponent does have 2 other creatures, they're not going to get any of the death triggers. Hushbringer will also shut off the ETB on Amptraptor. It will shut off the ETB on Ajani as well. So very happy with how that turn went. Had the opponent waited there and not killed the Esper Sentinel, then we're in a much more tricky position. We do deny them both the death triggers on the Unlucky Witness and the Trap Finder, but I think in that spot we're probably forced to just play a tap land. Because we don't want to waste the Ethereal Armor, right? So the opponent attacks, we're definitely not going to make the same mistake we did in, a previous game where blocking enables them to kill the creature with only sacrificing 1 creature rather than all 3 of them here. So we deny them the ETB on the Amptraptors, we deny them the death trigger on the Unlucky Witness, and now they're just left with 2 cards in the hand and a bombardment. And we've got, if we draw another land here, we can go Light Pause into Sheltered by Ghost. If we're not going to draw another land here, I think Hushbringer is the best draw, because it's pretty obvious the opponent doesn't have a Fatal Push or a Claim, the firstborn in hand, or they wouldn't have sacrificed their entire board. And now we're in a pretty sick position where, again, if they don't draw a Fatal Push or a Claim the firstborn off the top, they're going to have to deal with this Hushbringer. We do end up drawing a 1-mana aura here, which is pretty big. So just debating whether it's best to go for the Light Pause or the Spirit Dancer here. I think I just prefer Light Pause because we just want to close the game out as quickly as possible here. And we get the Griff Spoon down on the Hushbringer. Not sure that line is that good here. Like, typically you want to put the aura on the Hushbringer to buff its toughness to make it more difficult for the opponent to play around Goblin Bombardment. So looking back on it, I should have put the Griff Spoon on the Light Pause there. If Griff Spoon gave +1/+1 and turned it into a 2/3, then I think it makes sense, but yeah, I don't think I really like that line. So opponent prioritizes killing the Light Pause here, which I guess makes sense because it is a very powerful threat. But here we can just go Spirit Dancer. Now I like going Sheltered by Ghosts on the Hushbringer here because it does buff its... Well, it doesn't buff its toughness, but it gives it Ward 2, which makes it basically impossible to kill with the bombardment. But we answer the bombardment anyway, get to attack in for 3, and now I think there's basically no way the opponent can win here, especially because they have to pay a mana off the Confluence. So yeah, end up getting there.